Welcome to this tutorial where we're going to look at creating an online CV. This is my online CV, hosted on my website, mrjjones.co.uk. As we go through, it's got an about me, it lists my education experience, my employment, and then a few blog posts that I've created along the way. Before we get into creating yours though, we need to have a little bit of a background understanding as to how websites work. Starting off then, a website itself is just a computer that's serving those files. And what happens is your computer or phone or tablet, the client device, sends a message to our server asking, does it have anything it can do? Is it hosting any files for it? The server responds with the website via HTTP or HTTPS, and then the website is loaded on your device. If the server in question isn't running a web server service in any way, the client can still try and request something and ask for anything, but nothing will be responded, nothing will be given back to it, so it won't receive anything. And what we end up with is a small error. You can try this yourself. If you open up a new web browser and go to localhost on your computer, as we haven't got anything running, you will get an error that looks like this. It says that it can't reach this page, the connection has been refused. There is nothing looking to respond to it, so it can't do anything. So we're going to need to install a web server. And it sounds very complicated, but don't worry, I'll take you through the whole thing. Web servers come in a number of different styles. You have an Apache web server, which is the major web server that's used all across the world. You have Nginx, which is a variation on Apache with a better caching system to try and speed things up a little bit. And then you have Windows IIS, Microsoft's attempt at creating a web server. That's used with ASPX files and things like that, but it's not as common, it's not as powerful or popular as Apache or Nginx. As we go through then, we're going to be looking at Apache servers, and we're going to look at an Apache stack based on a Windows computer. So we're going to use Windows, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, or WAMP. And this is the logo for WAMP itself. You can do the same thing on an Apple computer using an application called MAMP, where the Windows application is swapped out for Mac OS. And of course, if you're running a Linux computer, then you'd have LAMP. So Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP. As I said, we're going to be looking at WAMP, and we're going to be using a program called UwAMP. UwAMP then is a portable piece of software that doesn't need to be installed, so it can easily be downloaded and run straight from any device. If you are doing this in an education environment, there's a link in the description to a blog by Powell that will show you how to do this safely and securely, allowing students to run UwAMP, but not be able to run other EXEs or not be able to modify anything in any other way. Alongside UwAMP, we're going to be looking to use an application called Heidi SQL. And what that's going to do is help us to manage our database. I will show you the traditional how to access PHP and use and look at how that works, but I find Heidi SQL so much more efficient, so that's what we're going to be focusing on. As well as that, we're going to be using Adobe Dreamweaver. Now, if I was myself creating a web service, a web client, a web application, I would look to use something like Sublime Text, a nice, simple, lightweight text editor that I am used to using. Part of this video is to be a follow-on from the WJEC's GCSE Digital Technology into the A-level side of things. And in the GCSE, the students are encouraged and the students are told to use Dreamweaver as their web development environment. So I'm going to stick with Dreamweaver as the follow-on element to this. We will look at putting an image into our online CVs, and we're going to use an application by XnView called XnConvert. Unlike the majority of the applications we're using in this video, it is a free portable application that doesn't require installation. So the software we're using, UwAMP, Heidi SQL and XnConverter. 3 portable free applications. The only thing that is in any way paid for and installed is Adobe Dreamweaver. But as I've said, if you want to substitute that out for any other text editor that you're comfortable with, then by all means do. Now, in the description below, you will find all of these links just to make it a little bit easier for you to find these applications. Download them directly from the sources of these applications, and then you know you can trust those files. So let's do just that. Here you can see I'm back in PowerPoint. Here's my final slide. I'm going to click onto UwAMP. I'm going to go to the download section on UwAMP, and I can go into this application here, which is a download zip file here. It's not the install.exe, it's the final one here, either RAR or zip, it's up to you. I'm quite happy with the zip. I'm going to save that in my online CV folder and just save that there. While that's downloading, I'm going to jump back into PowerPoint, grab Heidi SQL. Do the same thing, find the downloads page. I want not the installer, I want the portable version here. I'm running a 64-bit architecture, so I'm going to download that version, save it in that same online CV folder that's on my desktop. And I'm going to close these 2 down, continue downloading, let's leave that run. I'm going to go back in. I've already pre-installed Adobe Dreamweaver, so I don't need to download that, but let's grab XnConverter. So here we have XnConverter. I'm going to go to the download section here. I want to download it as a zipped program rather than an installer. And again, I'm going for the 64-bit version. Let's save that into this folder, and there we go. So I have all 3 downloads, and let me just show you again. If I go to localhost on this machine, it will not load anything. There's nothing in place just yet with it. It is simply my standard machine. So I'm going to come out of PowerPoint. I'm going to save the changes I've made. Okay, it doesn't like that font. Never mind. Moving on, and into these folders. So in here I have some files. I have a PDF of a CV. Let's get that open. And you can see that it's a CV here for a web developer called Isabel Jones, and it's got in place some basic details. I'm just going to use these as my demonstration details. I have created a demonstration HTML page where if I drag that to one side, and I open the CV again and drag it to the other side, you can see how they differ from each other. There's a little bit of difference around these points here, but generally speaking, I have that PDF and it's in a HTML version. So back into here then, I have my 3 zip files. I'm just going to right click on each of them and I'm going to extract files. I'm using 7-zip here, again, following through from things from WWDC. They quite like 7-zip at the moment, so that's how all of the files are sent to us. So I ensure that I use that with my students so that they know how that works. I've got XnConverter in here. XnConverter again is all of the different elements, and all we're looking for is the XnConverter exe. If I open that up for a second, then you can see it's a very basic page. It's got an input, it's got an output option, the format, and we'll come to use that a little bit later on. If I jump back into here then, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to very quickly create a folder called zips, drag all of these in there so they're out of the way, and I'm next going to go into UwAMP. Inside the UwAMP folder here, let's very quickly turn off preview pane because that doesn't help. We have a series of different files. You've got the binary file, the bin file at the top there. That is where a lot of the files run from. We have a PHP apps, which has all of our different PHP elements in place that we need. And it's got PHP-MyAdmin and the UwAMP PHP elements. We got a temp file, which is empty. We have a utility file, which has in place some different elements to help us out, such as an SQLite browser, so it can help with that, a different version of Heidi SQL. We have a www folder. Now this folder here is really important. This is the folder that UwAMP uses to host your web page files. And in there at the moment, you find a My Application file, which is empty. We are going to be deleting that. We don't need that. So I'm just going to press delete. and you have an index page, an index.php. I will open that in a couple of minutes time, but right now, if I try it, actually, if I go to edit, there you go, you can do it like this. You can see it's got a lot of PHP code, some HTML tags in place, just to show us how the web page looks. If I try and open that with a web browser, it wouldn't work, because PHP has to be run on a server, which is why we are using UwAMP in the first place. Underneath that, we have some licenses and README files, and then the UwAMP application itself, or UwAMP with user access control enabled, so you can run either one of those two and they'll do the same thing. I'm going to simply run UwAMP, which will take a couple of seconds. It's opened in my tray here, and here we go. Here it is. It's just loading a second, and it's got itself in place. Let's run you through what it's doing. At the top here, we have our server. Our server is in started mode. I can stop it, and we can see here that they're both running and using very little to no of my CPU. It's currently running version 5.6.8 of PHP. It's a little bit old. In the drop down, we do have PHP 7, so I will jump through to PHP 7 and put that in place. Apache itself is in offline mode, and what that means is not that it's not working, but it's not publicly giving that out. So if you went to my public IP address, you wouldn't load anything. If I swap that to online mode, then it would load whatever's on my computer. But with public IPs, they tend to be dynamic, they change on a regular basis. So if you did set that up and put it into online mode, got your public IP address and tried it, you'd probably find that it would work for a week or so and then it would change. MySQL again, it's running version 5.7.11, and that's the only version we have access to. Now as we go down, there's the ability to open the www folder and the web page, so we can get quick access to those two. And then we have some tools like PHP and MyAdmin, debug clients, SQLite, all the different bits and pieces. In our output window here, we do have one or two little messages, one or two little errors that are in place. And all it's telling me is that as I haven't run this as admin, I've just run it as a standard user, it's unable to add elements or add registry keys into my registry on the computer. That doesn't in any way impact or affect the way that our web server is going to work for what we're going to do. So if I open up my web page again, and I now go to localhost, you get UwAMP. And it's telling me that Apache is working fine, it's got my configuration, and it's got all my different bits and pieces already all in place. So now, if we think back to that slide where we had that sending and receiving requests, my client has said to the server, do you have something? And UwAMP has given it this back. So we now have something in place. If I go to PHP MyAdmin, and I put in here root, and the password will also be root, and I click on to go, it accesses PHP MyAdmin. And this is our back-end database management software. We can go into our databases here. We can see the different databases that exist, or we can create a new database if we want to and choose a different setup. But like I said, this is a little bit more complicated. What we're going to do instead is we're going to look at using Heidi SQL. So for now, I'm going to close down that window. I'm going to minimize UwAMP because we are still using it, but it's just not our active thing. That should have saved by now. There we go, that's gone. And I'm going to go back out of UwAMP into Heidi SQL. Now, just like the previous one, we are looking for the name HeidiSQL.exe. And if you have file extensions hidden, then it will just say Heidi SQL. And I can open that up. Let's minimize this for a second. And that will ask me here for my session manager. Now, we're going to create a new session. I'm going to go new. It's going to connect to localhost, or the IP range for localhost, which is 127.0.0.1. The username and password are both root, and I'm going to click on open. And just like we saw 2 seconds ago, we have in place our connection with the different databases that existed. What I can do here is create a new database, and it asks me for a name and collation just like it did on PHP MyAdmin 2 seconds ago. I'm going to call this online CV, just to put it nice basic, and click on OK. And that'll create my online CV for me. Now I want to show you the difference between creating a table here and creating a table on PHP and then we're just going to stick with Heidi SQL. But before we do that, I'm going to jump into my files. I'm going to open up a ERD document, an entity relationship document, and show you a normalized database setup. So what I've got here then is a set of different tables. In my tables, I have a user. That user has a user ID, first name, middle name, last name, date of birth, and that About Me section so that they can put in About Me. Now, one user can have many previous addresses. My previous address table has a user ID, an address ID, and the date moved out. That previous address table has a one-to-one relationship with the addresses table. So does companies and education establishments, because all of these addresses could be in some way used within our database. If I go back to my user table then, my user has a one-to-one relationship with current addresses. And my current address has a one-to-one relationship with addresses. And from there, our user has a one-to-many relationship with contact details. And the way we're going to set our contact details up is it's going to have a user ID to link it, a detail type such as phone number, email address, or home landline number, and the detail value to list what they are. Our user has a one-to-many relationship with employment, because someone can have more than one job, and a one-to-many relationship with qualifications. Our qualification table has a one-to-one relationship with our education establishment. Using that entity relationship diagram, we're going to create this users table twice. You don't have to create it twice in your tutorial. I'm just showing you how it works twice. So the first time I'm going to go through, I'm going to go to localhost. I'm going to use that to connect to PHP and MyAdmin, log in, and then in my online CV, I'm going to create a table called user. And it has to preset how many columns I want to use. So if I come into here, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So let's change that up to 6 and click go. Now it's outlined my 6 columns for me. So I want user ID, first name, last name, middle name, and all the others. So user ID, first name, middle name, last name. What else did I have listed? Date of birth and about me. Date of birth and about me. User ID can stay as an integer, and I'm going to use this auto increment feature to get it to automatically increment, and it will set it as my primary key, which is great. I've got then a varchar for these, a variable character array. I'm going to set this then as a date, and the about me, I want it to be a long piece of text, so I'm going to just set it as text. And if I click on save, it wants a length for different values, so I'd say 255 characters for each of these, and that's save. There we go. That's created the structure of my table. I can click onto browse to see what it looks like inside of it, and insert here to add someone into it. So James, Jones, Anthony. I got 12th of the 1st, 1989, and I'm just going to say hello a second. And go. And now that would have added me in, and you can see that I'm there. If I go back to my Heidi SQL connection and refresh my table, my users table appears. And when I double click on the table here, I've got the basic options, I've got all the different elements, but across the top here I've got the word data, and I can see how it looks. And it looks identical to what we have in this section here. User ID, first name, middle name, last name, date of birth, and about me. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to delete that table. So I'm going to use the drop table option to get rid of it. And if I refresh on here as well, that table will disappear. And I'm going to go into Heidi SQL. Let's refresh here. So let's refresh this as well. There's nothing there. My maze is still showing me that. But there we go. My database is empty. And I'm going to create a new table. Now the difference is here with Heidi SQL is it wants the name of the table up the top here, and I'm going to put in users. It then wants me to add in fields. And rather than having to preset how many fields I'm going to have, I can add in a field at a time and fill in some details about them. For example, user ID is an integer, and then I'm going to say, instead of allow null, I don't want it to be null, and I'm going to come back to that in a couple of seconds' time. I'm going to add in another table for first name. Sorry, not a table, field. And then I've got the list of different first name elements. I'm going to say varchar, and it automatically detects that it's going to be a 50 for me. If I add the next one in, it copies the previous preset. So I'm going to say middle name. Now, I'm going to change that from 50 to 100 characters. And if I click onto add, it copies what was above it, so it keeps that 100 in place. I'm going to say last name, and then I'm going to go on to date of birth, which is a type of date. So let's bring it through here. We've got date here, and I'm going to add in the last one, which has come up as date again, but this is going to be the about me, and it is going to be my type of text. Now, within there, I'm going to say first name and last name shouldn't be null, but I can let middle name be null. So if you don't have a middle name, you don't have to provide a value. Last name, I'm going to leave as not allowed to be null. Everyone should have a last name. Date of birth should be included. And I'm going to say about me can be null if it's not ready to be entered. Now, the one thing that is a little bit more complicated on here than it was on PHP-MyAdmin is setting up my primary key. The way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to click on the indexes. I'm going to add an index of a type primary key and drag in my user ID. Save that. It wants an invalid data. Okay, so I'm going to say default value. There is no default. Let's check no default on all of these actually. There we go. And now if I save it, there we go. It's set that up across the whole element. And I just find now that if I wanted to add in a user from the data section, I click on add, user ID, I didn't set it to auto increment. So let's go back and fix that for a second. So here it is, and I want it to be auto increment. This option here, click on OK and save. Now user ID, I'm going to add one in, first name, James, last name, Jones. Get into it, date of birth, and there. And it adds it in automatically for me. And what's nice about this, and it happens over here too, what's nice about Heidi is underneath it shows you what it's done in SQL format. So to add that user into that row, it's inserted into online CV users, the first name, last name, date of birth, and about me with the values James, Jones, date of birth, and the about me section. So I've got that there. I'm going to come back here, create a new table, and I'm going to go for current address as my next table. Now, with our table names, we can't have spaces, so I've left it as a camel case setup. I'm going to go back in, user ID, address ID. Nice and simple. User ID, address ID, and save that. I'm going to set these up then, foreign keys. I'm going to add in a foreign key. It's going to call it FK1 for now. It is the user ID. The reference table for it here is my current addresses, and it's going to connect to user ID. Sorry, not current addresses, it's going to be the user table, and that's going to set that up. And when I save that, it creates that foreign key link between those two tables. So when I go back into Online CV, add in a new table, and I'm going to call this addresses, the address table even. I'm going to use address ID, and this is not going to allow null. It is going to have the default of auto increment because it's going to be my primary key here. And I'm going to add in the next one, which was simply building number, which I'm going to change from integer. I'm going to change it to varchar of 50, because yes, most building numbers are 2, 4, 7, 8, whatever number you want to put in place, but some buildings have names. And I don't want to limit myself to a situation where I have to use a number where the building doesn't have a number, it has a name instead. I'm going to add in the next one, which is street. I think 50 characters should be enough. By all means, increase it if you think you need higher. I'm going to change the default to no default. I'm going to say no default here. I'm going to say town. Now I have made a slight mistake here. Let me just correct it. Everything else is lowercase. Let's keep it all lowercase. It makes things easier. So I got street, town, county, postcode. County and postcode. Now I want to move that up so it puts it in place there. I'm going to save that table. Table definition, there can only be one column, must be defined as a key. Okay, no problem. So I haven't set up my key yet, so I'm going to go to my indexes, add in an index, which is a type of primary key, drop it and save it. There we go. So did I cover all of those elements? Building, street, town, county, postcode, ID. I did. Amazing. I'm now going to go back into my current address table. I'm going to add in a second foreign key. Let's remove that, sorry, in the foreign key table. Let's discard changes for a second so I don't break anything. I'm going to add in a second foreign key 2. It is going to be the column address ID. It's going to reference my addresses table, and it's going to be my address ID reference, and I'm going to save that. So now I have my 2 foreign keys linked up, like I've said here. My user ID to user ID, my address ID to my address ID, which was at the bottom there. I'm not going to go through every single one of these, showing you how to input the different values. You should be able to add those different elements in place yourself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video here 2 seconds, finish setting up my table very quickly, and then come back when we move on to looking at Dreamweaver and setting elements up. Okay, so that's all set up. Let's quickly run through these tables just so you can see what I've done. My addresses table then. If I go to the basic options to start with, name, and here are the field elements in place. We have address ID, building number, street, town, postcode, county, all in place. Indexes, the primary key in this occasion is address ID, and there are no foreign keys to this table. On companies, we have company ID, address ID, company name. The company ID is the primary key, and the foreign key is the address ID to link to the addresses table. If I go to the contact details, we've got the user ID, detail type, detail value, and the foreign key field there. I'm going to use this table a second. I'm going to jump into the data side of this because I want to show you how this one works. So on this drop down here, then I'm going to choose James as my user. Detail type, I'm going to put in email, and the email value, I'm going to put in cpd@mrjjones.co.uk. And that has put that in place. Now if I had another type, so I could say, again, user is James Jones, I'm going to put in mobile as my mobile number, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That isn't my mobile number. I don't know whose mobile number that is. It's just a dummy number in place. Now, as I put that in place, I can do a query. I can search for all of the elements that are user ID 1 and bring back the information. And that would give me my email and my mobile number for that user. So that is a nice way when we don't know how many fields, because otherwise our table would be immensely in size for our different elements. This just try it again. This just swaps the table design to a bit of a friendlier way. Current addresses then, let's go back into our table setup. My current address has user ID, address ID, both foreign keys. Under the foreign key section, let's bring this back over a little bit, and this one too, there we go, just so you can see all of those a little bit clearer. The address link is address ID to the address ID. The user ID is user ID to the user ID. Education establishment is very similar. It's got the establishment's ID, address link, and the name for the establishment. There it is. Employment, very similar. It's got its 2 foreign keys in place. You can see what the links are and how they're set up. You've got your previous address. Now, I believe, let's go back to here, that should be a capital A. We are camel casing everything after all. It doesn't like the fact I'm doing it there. Okay, let's go back into here. Current address didn't. Also, perhaps it doesn't camel case the database names then. Perhaps it just normalizes those for me. Previous address then has its 2 foreign keys. Same setup. You can see the foreign key links in place here. You've got your qualification. The qualification has its 2 foreign keys in place. Again, it's got the subject, grade, and the date obtained. And we have our users table, which we looked at the start. Now, the rest of these tables, I haven't really looked at these elements here. So let's very quickly do that. We want our address table to have all of these elements. We may not necessarily have a county. Not often. I live in Merthyr, my county is Merthyr, my town is Merthyr. I don't often put Merthyr when I'm putting my address in place. So I'll swap that and say either of those two can actually be down as empty. There is no default for any of these, so let's go into companies. It will have to have a company ID and an address ID and a name, so I don't want any of those to be null. Going forward, contact details, detail type, I'm going to have that, I'm not going to have that as null. All of these elements have to be filled in. Address, well, for that link to be in place, they have to both be there. Yep. Not a lot in this occasion is going to be null. Job title, okay, so let's see. We want that and we want that. Job title is going to have to exist. Role details, so that is the job description, what it is you're doing, your responsibilities, that's going to have to be there. Start date realistically should be there, but you may not necessarily remember when you started a job, depending on how far back you're going with this. And same goes for the end date. The end date won't necessarily be in place if you are currently in that job. So I'm going to leave those two as able to be null. Previous addresses, date moved out. Well, it's a previous address, so you should have a date that you've moved out, even if it's only rough. Address ID and user ID, let's keep those as not null. And let's go. We need that. Subject, we definitely want to know what subject it was. Grade, you may not necessarily have attained it yet, and neither attained date. So I'm going to save those and leave those two null. So that is my database set up. You can by all means go in now and start filling some of these elements in. So for example, user ID would be James, education establishment. They're not listed yet, so I can't fill that one in. Let's cancel that a second. I'd have to go through, I'd have to do the addresses first, then the establishment, and then so on and so forth. And now while I'm thinking about it, don't necessarily have to always have the address of where you went to, what school it was, or anything like that. It is helpful, but it's not always required. So all of these elements, the database is set up. We will come back to the database, but right now we are done with that. So let's just close that down. Let's close that down. Let's close that down. So our database is set up. The next thing we need to look at is the actual design of our website and where we're going to put it. Like I said earlier, the www folder is where UwAMP holds all of its information. And I said if I go into here and I open this up, what that's going to do is load that file and load a jargon, and it's going to open in Dreamweaver so we can see it nice and clearly. Now, on the right hand side here, sorry, not left, we have our site view. Currently, in Dreamweaver, if I was to close this and close that, there we go, I have loaded the Parkwood Vale site from my online course. I want to go into sites, I want to go to a new site, and I'm going to set this up as online CV. And I'm going to say that the site folder location for this example is on my desktop in my online CV UwAMP www folder, and select folder and click save. Now, you should have seen that there was a slight change over on the side here, that it is now just showing my index page. And if I double click that, that opens up my index page here. If I click onto the preview button down the bottom here, and I say that I want to preview in, say, Microsoft Edge, never mind, it's not happy with that. It wanted to be on a server. It doesn't understand that it is on a server, but it's opened up and you can see that it's working there. It's trying to create its own server. We don't want to do that. We are just going to simply stick with our local host. Now, for a second actually, let's jump back to there. Let's go back a page. Dreamweaver has tried to create its own server on our local host. There's our local host address, it's used the port there and it's put this preview in place. But the preview is a HTML file. So all of the pre-existing code that is set up as part of PHP has not run. If I simply go to my local host, it looks different because it's executing that PHP code. Now, we don't want any of this. Let's jump back into here. I'm going to press Control and A to highlight it all and delete. I'm going to save that file by using Control and S. Yep. And now, when I go to my local host page, it's empty. I've deleted everything. We're going to be looking at some basic PHP elements to put this in place. So for example, PHP always starts with an open tag, which is a question mark tag that looks like this. I'll zoom in a little bit. I'll keep it zoomed in as much as I can do. There are going to be some elements where I need to zoom out. While I've got that in place, I can echo, which means to print to my screen. And I am going to simply echo, let's put that in a bracket, and I'm going to say, hello world. Very traditional programmer element. Now, with PHP, we also need to end any line of code with a semicolon. And I'll be honest with you, they're going to be the bane of your life. Trying to remember to find all those semicolons is going to give you errors, and you're going to have to work with those errors. And if I refresh this page then, why is that not showing? Echo hello world. Because it's expecting PHP full tags rather than short tags. And there it is. So we've got our PHP, we've got our hello world in place there. Nice and simple. Remembering the full tag is going to be a difficult one for me. I'm used to using short tags, but we will get to that. But before we do anything with our page, we do need to set up some other prerequisites that we have to have in place. Now I'm going to be linking this to Bootstrap CSS. I'm also going to be linking this to Font Awesome for some icons, and possibly linking parts of it to a text editor to make it a little bit easier when we're entering details in our admin section. But for now, I know for a fact I need a folder for my images. And I'm going to call this my image folder, IMG. And I'm simply going to go into my files, find my me picture, copy it, and place it in that UwAMP folder in there, in the image me. So there it is. It is a type of PNG. Good practice would really be to have, let's go here, a PNG folder, and have that picture inside the PNG folder. Because we are also going to be using WebP images, so we can differentiate between the two. Now, on here then, if I want to display my picture, I use a simple image tag. It is the same image tag that you would use in the standard HTML. And Dreamweaver does have that nice feature, and let's go back and show you that again, that when I put in my speech marks, one, it does end the speech marks for me, but it also allows me to browse just by clicking and choosing where I want to find that picture from. And now if I save that and I go back into here and refresh it, we get that picture there. So we can use standard HTML within our PHP setup. Now, I said at the start that we're going to be linking this with Bootstrap. And we need to start off with our HTML element. If I was to click on HTML and put that in place, there's the set of my connection. I'm going to put in the head section, which is where all of the head elements within my HTML are going to be. And I'm going to put in a body section, which is going to be where the main elements of my website exist. So that's a standard layout for any sort of website. The head section, the body section, any content goes here, any meta content goes here. Meta content is just content that's used to describe how our website is going to work. We're going to be using Bootstrap, and we're going to go for Bootstrap 5. So let's go Bootstrap 5. We're going to go onto Bootstrap 5 here, and we're going to take this top link, which allows us to directly import our Bootstrap 5. And simply just paste it there. Now, like I said, there are going to be elements where I might need to zoom out, and I can zoom out just to go through this with you, just to show you what it looks like. And realistically, integrity and cross-origin we don't need. I can save that, and nothing will actually change as of yet on my site because I've not included it, I've not told it what to do, and not done anything different with it. I did say we're going to use Font Awesome, and we're going to do the same sort of thing, so Font Awesome 4, but I want a Content Delivery Network, a CDN, I've done CND there, but let's swap that around to CDN, link to it. Now, if I go to Font Awesome's website, and I click onto, let's get rid of that, we're happy with 4 for this, and I go for how to use it, it's got this here, so the link to the style sheet, and then the path to the style sheet. Well, that's not really giving me a path to it. Path to is looking for something that you already know. But if I go to this website here, CDN.js, so Content Delivery Network JavaScript, and on here, I can specify what version I want to use. So I said we're going to be using, we'll go for version 5 actually. I used version 4 in my demonstration the other day, but I'll use version 5 this time. So let's go for version 5 here, wait for it to load. We have the version 5 at the top here. I'm going to copy the tag and go back onto Dreamweaver and paste that tag there. Again, it's got the integrity, it's got the cross-origin, and it's got the referrer. We don't need those elements, we can just have this as our standard style link. And what that will allow us to do is use these CSS elements, so Font Awesome's CSS and Bootstrap's CSS within our site. Font Awesome is just a simple website that offers images. So let's go icons. We have here all sorts of different icons. Say I want to do a person, and I search for that. It comes up with all of these different people icons. It's got person here. I want a free icon. I got all of these different people icons doing different things. If I click onto it, I get the code to use it. And when I drop that code into the body section of my page, if I was to save that and reload my local host now, I would get nothing. Why is that not appeared? That's why I tend to stick with what I know rather than going fancy. There we go. And person Font Awesome. That's not actually showing me which version of Font Awesome it's using. So Let's go back and search for Font Awesome 5 icons. That's that same page. Okay, let's swap that back to Font Awesome 4. And when this loads in a second, no, it's not gonna. Okay, good. Right, we'll stick with 4. Font Awesome 4 is get icons. Yeah, it should have worked, but that didn't want to work. So let's change this. Let's go Font Awesome 4. Copy the link. Don't copy over your copy. Paste it. Yeah, we don't want these. And on Font Awesome 4, person. They're not as fancy looking. Their website isn't developed as much, but it should now at least work. And if I refresh this now, we get a little person up in the top corner, way out of the way, but it is there using Font Awesome. Now I'm going to keep Font Awesome icons open here, fontawesome.com/version4/icon. That will allow me to find the icons as I want them. I'll also be using the Bootstrap 5, as I said earlier. And within Bootstrap 5, if I go to getting started here, we can do documents, and that gives us all of our documents to how we can use different things. So they're going to be useful as we go along. I can look up different elements and how I can implement different things, layouts, different sections. And one of the layouts we're going to be looking at is the column layout with containers. So I'm going to put this in place. Now, in this section, I have my basic elements, my 2 links in here so far. Let's just, yeah, that's fine. I also want to put in a title. The title is what the page is going to be called, and as I'm basing this on that CV of that fake person, let's open her CV up again, and her name is Isabel Jones. So I'm going to take her details, I'm going to paste it in there as Isabel Jones. What we're actually going to be doing when we connect through our database is have that information pulled directly from our database. So when we're on there as our user, it pulls through our name. But right now I'm putting Isabel Jones's in there so you can see that. And the way that that is used is at the top corner you can see it says here the address of my website. If I reload my web page, it now says Isabel Jones, because the title of my page is Isabel Jones. I'm going to set up a divide or a div element within my web page. It's going to have a class, and that class is going to be container. Now, as we're using Dreamweaver, and Dreamweaver has a built-in knowledge of Bootstrap, it will give us some tooltips about our different elements. So it's got container fluid, container large, or basic container. And what a container is a box that the whole of my website is going to sit in. I'm going to come in by here, I'm going to put in a div again, class is going to be a row. Now, that is the basic setup of any sort of element within a Bootstrap page. If I opened up the CV I've done previously, what we have here is a container, which is why it's centralized. And in this section, we have 2 divides, or 2 divs. Our first one has a picture. Our second one has in place our 3 bits of information. They're going to be set up in different sizes, which is why it's next to it here and not all the way over on the cross like it has here. So, in this, I did a div class, and it's going to be a column, MD for medium sized, and I'm going to say 3 for my picture. I do the same thing here. So div class, and it's going to be a column, and it is MD. Now our column maxes out at 12. So if our first one is 3, our next one realistically should be 9. In here, I'm going to put in my image, and the source of my image, as we've already seen, is the PNG file. And I'm going to set the width of that image for a second to 100%. On this side here then, I'm going to do the same sort of thing. I've got those 3 bits of information. My H1, the main heading in my website is going to be Isabel Jones. Our main title for our person. Underneath that, if we look back to this, we have her job title and then her email address. So her job title is going to be a smaller heading, and I'm actually going to jump H2, just go straight to H3. I say web developer, and then I'm going to go underneath here and do a href, because it's going to be a link, a mail to link, and her mail to email address in this was just hello@greatsite.com. So let's copy that, paste it, and paste it there. Now when I save this and I go back into my local host, when I refresh it, it starts to look like this one here. So they are very similar. If I snap them side by side, you can see how they are laid out similarly. The main difference between these at the moment is that sort of top gap and the bottom gap here, which we can't see yet because we haven't done this section. That top gap is put in place by saying that my row has a margin to its top, MT, and the MT margin top I'm going to set to 4. Now, if I bring these back up and refresh this one, it drops it down, and they do look very similar. I think I use a margin 3 on the one side, I've used a margin 4 on the other, but realistically they're starting to pull in place. I'm going to go through, I'm going to continue to develop this then. I'm going to scroll underneath this and this row here for my top section, which I could put in a comment here, and let's just put in minus symbols, top section, and there. I'm going to copy that, find the end div, and I'm going to say end top section, and have that in place. Now realistically at the moment I don't need that file explorer, so let's minimize that out of the way and leave it like this so we can see more of our code. So I've got in place my title, my H1 and different elements here. We're going to replace these with parts of our database code. Right now they're just there in place. In fact actually, I'm going to save that and we are going to do exactly that. Let's build this up in our database. So, I don't need to go there because everything's in here. I'm going to reopen up Heidi SQL Portable. Connect here. Sorry, I forgot to put the password in. And in the users section, I can go to data and change this up. So, Isabel Jones. There we go, and that's changed up perfectly for me. Now, I do have, in this one, a current job role, which isn't actually in here. So I'm just going to go back into here, and actually in employment, we've got these here. What might work better is just to lose that. That might just be a little bit simpler. I'm going to save that there. At the moment, on our screens, there is no PHP elements whatsoever. We do need to create a PHP file. And what we need to do is connect to our database. So I'm going to create here by creating a new, let's go new file. It's not going to be a type of HTML. I'm going to call this connection.php. And that file is there. It's automatically populated some HTML elements into it that we don't need. So I'm going to delete those out. And that leaves me with my blank PHP connection that I have ready to go. I'm going to come up to here and I have to set this as one of the very first things. PHP, I'm going to say requires or require, and I want it to require my connection.php. I forgot the speech marks, and as I said earlier, we need to end this with our semicolon. And all that's actually going to do is tell my local host that whenever it loads my page, first of all, load my connection page. So I go to my connection page and I put in my PHP tag and I do echo echo hello world, close that off, end my PHP tag and save it. When I reload here then, it does that piece of code first. So with that in mind then, we need to set up the connection to our database. When we are setting up connections in PHP, we need to first of all initialize some variables. Variables in PHP start with a $sign. So I'm going to say $, I'm going to say host, which is simply going to be my local host, 127.0.0.1. I'm then going to tell it to $, I want the user is equal to root. I want its password, which is going to be also equal to root, because it's the same thing. And I'm going to say that the database is equal to, and this is online CV. Now, I can save that, I can refresh this, and nothing will change. Because I haven't actually told it what to do with this information. It just knows this information inherently. I'm doing nothing with it, but it knows what it is. And I'm going to say con for connection. Actually, I put two ends in, equals, and this is where I'm going to set up my database connection. I want it to be a MySQLi underscore connection or connect. And what we're going to do is we're going to connect to our $host. We're going to provide it our $user and our $password. And we're also going to give it our $db. So that connection type to connect to our database uses the host username, password, and database. We could have just put this information directly into these fields here. But if we ever needed to change it, and for ease of reading, it's better to put it in like this. Now if I save it, and I refresh it, nothing happens. So now with our connection in place, what we need to do is check to see if there are any connection errors, anything that would stop it from working. Because for example, if I was to remove one of those dots, save it and refresh, we get warnings appearing everywhere. It's not connected, but it hasn't stopped my website from running. No such host is known, it's not been able to connect. So I need to have something that gives me a bit of a better description. Put that back in place, save it and refresh it, and that disappears again. So my connection has been set there. What I'm going to do is going to say if, and I'm going to use a MySQL function, and it is going to be a connect error. So if there's a connection error, then what I want it to do is I want it to tell me that there's an error. So I'm going to echo failed to connect to the database, and I want to add to it, just like in Boolean algebra we use a full stop to add something, and it is going to be a MySQL underscore and connect error. So it's going to tell me what the error is, and then I want it to exit to stop it trying to do anything different. Let's put that semicolon in place, save that, and let's refresh. All perfectly fine. Let's cause an error again and see how it looks different. Refresh. It's got my warnings, but it's telling me that it failed, there's no such known host. It's got that information in place. Now, those warnings are there to help us and give us a bit more details, and we'll look at how to suppress those a little bit later on if need be. But right now, I've got my failed to connect error there. If I put this back in place, I should no longer have that error, and I should have this in place. Perfect. What I'm going to do is come over here. My title is going to be based around my user's name from my database. I'm going to put up here a query, a search based around my connection element. So I'm going to call it user to start with, because that's what I'm going to put in place. My user is going to connect to my SQL, and it is going to be a MySQL underscore query. It needs to start off with my connection, and then I can put in my query string. Now, it's better practice to have a variable for SQL and put in your SQL here, and then just call that variable. Even though it's only just below it, it makes it easier for us to debug and look at what's going on. We can even get it to print out that SQL element if need be when we start doing a bit more advanced things. In here then, what I'm going to do is tell it to select. So I'm going to say select, and I want the first name. Actually, I want all of the information about my user. So star from users. I'm going to say where user ID is equal to 1. Oh, put that in there. And semicolon. Now it can be a bit confusing because I have a semicolon here and here. This is my SQL as a command, and this is my PHP as a command. If I was to save this and run this, nothing changes. I've not told it to do anything different with this information yet. It has just queried it for me, and it has put it in place. I want to now go through and purely pull out the information that I want. I don't want all the other information, I just want the information that is responsible for me. And what I can do is say that I want the basic row information. So I'm going to say $row for this. And I want to MySQL I underscore fetch underscore array. And the array that I want to fetch is going to be my user array based around what I've already told it. So if I save that and I refresh this, I get no issues. And then I can say that that information, if I was to echo $row at position 1, will give me Isabel. Because when it performs my query, it brings back that information 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I've got that there. I can also swap it up and put in place the name of what it is I'm looking for. So first name, based around the name it's been given here. So when I refresh this, it still says Isabel. Nothing's changed because that is her first name. One of the brilliant things with how PHP works is now that I know this is working, I can actually swap that to say user. And PHP will automatically overwrite what's in user with what it finds in user. And when I refresh my page, I still get Isabel. And I can have that now in place. So I have my user's details. I can save that. And instead of saying title equals Isabel Jones, I can say title is equal to PHP. And in here, I can say echo, and I want it to echo for me $user. I want the row, which is first name, and I want to add to it a space. I want to add into it $user and put in place last name. And once all of that is completed and I semicolon it and save it, if I refresh, it still says Isabel Jones. If I come up here and change it from Isabel back to James, as it was 2 seconds ago, when I refresh it now, instead of saying Isabel Jones, it says James Jones, because it's using the information directly from my database being pulled through using my SQL connection. So it's able to run that query, bring back that single row, and I can query that row. As we come down to here then, I'm going to take all of this PHP code, I'm going to copy it into Isabel Jones here and replace it and save it. And then when I refresh it, it's all as I expect it to be, because it's pulling that information out of the database. Now, it gets a little bit more tricky when we start looking at our email address, because if I go into my contact details, I've got email, I've got mobile. But in here, what I'm going to do is the same thing. So PHP, let's just grab a second, my SQL and these elements here. I'm going to copy it, and underneath I'm going to paste it. So I'm focusing on this section here. I don't want to select star from users anymore. I want to select star from contact details, where user ID is 1. My variable name is going to be contact details, and I'm fetching my array. It is a little bit of a different scenario, and I need to finish this here and save that. Oh, I duplicated it, I didn't mean to. Let's save it and refresh it. Nothing's changed yet. I've not told it to do anything with that information it's got. But I do now need to loop through all of the different elements within that database. Because my contact details, when I select star from contact details where that is 1, if I copy that and paste that query there, I get these two here. If I try to do echo, and I try to echo contact details at position 1 and save that, when I run it, it comes up and says the word email. All it's actually doing is getting me my last element. It's not getting me all of the elements within it. I wanted to fetch all of the elements so then I can decide what to do with those elements after it. So what I need to do then is adjust my fetch all command so that it gets me a bit more information. I need to tell it that I wanted to focus on the MySQL I. Let's get rid of that pop out there because it's not what I was looking for. There we go, MySQL I, let's get rid of that, underscore associated elements. And then rather than just echoing the very first one, I want to loop through each of these. And I'm going to use a loop called a for each loop. Now, our for each loop will take an element that I give it. So I'm going to copy my container there. Assign a new variable for it. So I'm going to say as $contact. And then it will loop through each of those different sections. Now, if I was to echo here, $contact, referencing the new variable at position type, and from here I'm going to say detail type. So detail type, When I save this and reload the page, I get email and mobile directly in place. Well, rather than echoing it out, I'm going to say if my contact type there is equal to email, because that's the type I'm working with, then I want it to echo contact, and instead of echoing contact detail type, I want it to echo my detail value. And let's terminate that, save it, and refresh. So now we have the email that I put in my email in the email field on the database, but it's not set up as a hyperlink. So we need to look at how we can use this structure here directly within our PHP. There are two ways in which it can be done. One of those ways is to break out of our PHP command. So if I put my curly braces in, when it falls into this section here, I can tell it that we're no longer using PHP, but instead we're just going to put in some standard HTML. And there it is, my standard HTML. When it comes to this element here though, I want to go back into using PHP and I want to echo this value. And then stop using PHP. And in this section here, I'm going to do the same thing again because that's how our email addresses work. So it comes into this loop. If the value is a type of email, then it steps into this loop and breaks out and stops processing PHP. It sets up my standard HTML mail to, but then goes back into PHP to connect and get our value, and then come back out. So if I save this and refresh it, it'll now have just that one email address. And that is one method of doing it, by breaking out of PHP and going back and forth between it. Another method would be to stay in PHP entirely and set it up, let's get rid of that tag there as well because that would throw me, and set it up as this is all going to be echoed out. Now, on our keyboards we have our speech marks, we have our single ticks, and we also have backslashes, backticks. Each one of those, each different element can be used in PHP. So if I swap my double tick for a single there, a second, and get rid of this, to see how it all lines up, put that there, and terminate it. My PHP element will now print all of this section here, mail to, okay, yeah, as if it was main text. So if I was to save and refresh it, it just prints it out as if it's text. It can't handle it. But when it comes to things like my mail to here, I can put in a single tick and connect those elements using the standard add symbol for Boolean SQL. And I can do the same thing here. So come out of it, connect to it, and go back into it and save it. And then if I was to refresh it, it gets my email address. Now, as with most things in computer programming, there is no right or wrong way of doing this. It is just whatever works easier for you. I would say, on the whole, probably coming back out of PHP and then putting that in place and going back into it might work a bit easier for people. But I've said here then that I want to connect to my SQL and select all of the contacts from my contact details where the user ID is 1. I've then got those informations. I've then got all of that information out of it using the associated fields and looped through them. If the detail type is email, then I print it to the screen so it can be shown. And that allows me to put in place my front-end element that shows me from my section here. And if I bring back Isabel's other element, apart from the fact that I dropped the web developer page, it's looking pretty much the same. My email address is there rather than Isabel's. We're going to now look next at this section by here. So, after all of that's in place then, we're going to go underneath our top section here, and I'm just going to press enter a few times, get some space to work in, and put it here. And I'm going to put in a div, back to HTML, class, row. Inside my row, I'm going to put in a div, class, container. No, sorry, not a container, a column. And these are MD6s. These two are going to be pretty much equal to each other. One of them is going to be my right-hand column, the other my left-hand column. Inside here then, because this is my first column, and if we look on Isabel's CV here, we can see they have a border. I'm going to look at how I can place a border in place. Go into my bootstrap. Let's make it full screen to make it a little bit easier to see. And if I go through the different elements, we've got all sorts of different sections here. And sometimes it is a lot easier just to search for things. So I'm going to search up here for border. And it brings in my borders section that can be used. And it has in place, we've got our border on the outside, which is called border, a border on the top or bottom, just top and bottom, and a border to start with or end with or end and start. So I'm going to say that in this section here, I want to put in a border because we can have more than one CSS class applied to something. Inside of this section then, that's where I'm going to start putting in my different elements. So my H2 for this is going to start off and it's looking at the about me. So I'm going to say about me. Underneath that, I already know I have the about me details in my $user from where I got everything out of user earlier. And I'm going to say echo, I forgot the echo word, echo user at position about me. Now, if I terminate that properly, save that and refresh my Isabel page, we should end up with about me, and we have in place what I've got in my about me. I'm going to cheat ever so slightly. I'm going to take what's here, copy it into Heidi, into my users table, data, and paste it in place. When I refresh this, we get the same about me that Isabel's got there. But as you can see, we don't quite have our spacing right. If I scroll to the top here, you can see the spacing's there and it's not here. So in my row, I say margin top is equal to 3. And in my class here, I'm also going to say margin top is equal to 3. If I load these up and refresh them, we get it a little bit better off. Not quite perfect, but it's looking better than it did. Now I got this little person caret here, which in font awesome, if I typed in person, was the same person we used earlier. And I'm just going to copy this font awesome code just before about me and save it. And when I refresh there, about me now has that little person. We can see that there's a gap in, a bigger gap there, so I'm going to increase that gap by putting it in place here, class equals margin top, and I'm going to put in a 4. Not quite as big, but I'll be happy with a 4. So about me's done. Contact is the next one, and let's go back into here. again, we have our contact details already in our contact details element here. So underneath this, I'm going to put in another h2. It is going to have its class of mt4, and it is going to say contact details. Now, if I look back at what we did there, there's a card with a person on it. Let's go over to here. Nope, here. And from Font Awesome, it was the address book here. You can see it's the same thing. So I'm going to highlight that, copy it, and here we go, and paste it there. Now when I save that and I refresh Isabel's page, we now have contact details too. We don't have the contact details in place, but we have the word contact details. In Isabel's contact details, she has a phone number, she has a website, and she has a address. Well, I'm going to swap website out for email address again, and we're going to go through and do the same thing here. So underneath our contact details, we want to loop back through our contact details section here. So I'm going to copy this code entirely. Same block of code we did a little bit earlier on, put in the PHP element and paste it there. Now, the main difference here is we still want to print all of the details no matter what they are. So I'm going to copy my other if and paste it below there. And if the contact detail type, the if has appeared all the way over there, let's bring this back, is now listed as, let's say, contact details, mobile. So we'll say mobile. Then what we want to do is print out the mobile, the contact value. We don't need it to be a mail to this time. It is just going to be the detail itself. So I can get rid of actually this very top section here. So no longer needs that mail to link, it's just there. And it's going to print those two elements. But we're going to use Font Awesome to give them their own little icon as well. So if I go back onto Font Awesome icons and I search this time around for phone, I get the different phones there. We have a mobile phone, a bit more fitting. I'm going to copy this and I am going to tell it here to first of all do my mobile phone. On my email, so I'm going to go back onto Font Awesome icons. I'm going to search this time for email. And we've got an envelope for an email. That'll do. I'm going to copy this section here. And in here, outside of the A tag, I'm going to paste it there. A little bit tricky on where that's being pasted. I understand that can be a bit confusing. But effectively, what it's saying is, here is my ahref. When I close the tag for my ahref, then put in my email element. And if I go back to Isabel's page and refresh it, I get the elements there. They are listed, they're not stylized very well, but they are listed one next to the other. I could do the same thing to say if in there, instead of mobile, was say landline, and we've got that there, and FA, let's say phone instead. And when I refresh the page, because she doesn't have a landline, it doesn't make a difference. But obviously these sort of don't look as nice as they do on the main website section. They all have their own lines to start with, and they are laid out a little bit nicer. All we've got to do to do that is where our I tags are, and in this one our ahref tag, we want to put in a new paragraph and end a new paragraph. So that will force them to each have their own line and each have in place their own spacing. And now, when I refresh it, it comes down there. I've made a mistake. What have I done wrong? I've put that in the wrong place. That shouldn't be there. That should be at the very end here, inside its own speech mark. Like so. And it would have happened the same on landline, but obviously landline doesn't exist. That belongs there. And that doesn't there. Let's get rid of one of those. Let's get rid of one of those and that there. Okay. So now when I refresh that, it gets its own detail, its own little bit in place. Starting to pull it together. The skills section, we haven't included any skills section in our database setup, so that could be another table added, and it would just be repeated in the same sort of way. Now, just to show that it can be done, we can add in tables at any point if we've forgotten about them. I'm going to go back, I'm going to go add, create a table. I'm going to call this skills. It's going to have in place the user ID as a user ID link. And I'm going to put in skill. And that is just simply going to be a varchar. And I'd say 255 should be plenty. Save that. And let's go foreign key, add our user ID, reference to our user table, and it's going to be our user ID. When I save that, that puts that in place. I'm not going to allow null, and I'm not going to allow null for the skill. If you're going to have a skill, you can have a skill. You can't have a skill of no skill. In there then, my user ID is Isabel. I know I haven't put a skill in yet. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to steal web design. Yep. So let's see. Isabel, web design. I'm going to go back onto here. Branding. Add this in. And they're all going to be linked with Isabel. And graphic design. SEO. Oh, data. And then finally, her last skill listed is marketing. In here then, it's going to be very similar. So this is on this contact details here. I'm actually going to steal contact details as its element there, put it there, and change it from contact details to skills. Save that. Onto Font Awesome to find a skill-based icon. If I put in skill, nothing really comes up under Font Awesome 4. If I put in setting, gives me different things, and I suppose a wrench could be an icon for it. Let's copy that. You can see previously what I actually used on the Isabel setup when I did it as plain HTML was the 3 cogs. That was there, but I'm going to use the wrench this time just to mix it up. I want to replace that with that. We have skills, and if I relaunch my page, skills now appears. On this current page, each of my skills is listed with a bullet point next to it. That's an element called an unordered list, or a UL. And we are going to use our UL in a standard HTML style. But inside of that UL, what we are actually going to do is use some PHP code to structure and put in place what we're going to have. So we need to come back up here because we need to select something now from our database, from our skills table. We want to get those details and we want to loop through each of those details. So I still need all of that element there. And I'm just going to take it to this section here and paste it. So I've got select star from this time around skills, where user ID is equal to 1. Get the associated rows, loop through each of these, and this down here is contact details, but I don't want that. I want it to instead be called skills. So let's say $skills, and let's get rid of that double $. Perfect. And this is going to be skill as a singular. Now, unlike before, where we've had if statements to differentiate and do different things depending on which one it is, this time, all we really need to do is print it. So I'm going to say echo. Inside my echo, I'm actually going to use a single tags, and I'm going to say list item, and I'm going to end my list item. So for each skill, put in a bullet point. Inside that bullet point, what I want you to put in place is $sign skill, open brackets, and it is going to just be called skill. And terminate that there, save that, and what we should get when I refresh is our bullet point list of skills. So this is all in place. On the one side, we have everything for Isabel there. The skills, like I said, I've changed that up just to show you can. On the other side, then we've got our education. We haven't even come close to touching upon this just yet. That's just there, and it's going to work very much in a similar way to what we've got here. Now you might have spotted that we've got her email address and telephone number, but we haven't actually got the address, the 123 Anywhere Street, Any City element in place. And we did set up an addresses table and a current address table, so there's no reason why we can't. As current addresses is dependent on addresses and users being populated, I have to fill in the details in the addresses table first. So address ID is going to be auto increment, building number is 123, street is, sorry, my bad, clicked in the wrong place, 123, street is any street, town was any city, and postcode, I'm going to say AN7, let's say 2TY. And that's in place there. Now my current address table, I can say add a row in place for my user, which is Isabel, and my 123 address there. So they are now linked. Pulling that information together, spanning across all of my tables, can be a little bit more difficult. And I'm going to do it first of all in Heidi SQL to show you how to do it. We are still going to use a select command. And I do want to select, well, realistically, I don't want everything. I only want, say, address dot, and I want building number, address dot, I want street, and address dot, and I want town. Let me full screen that so it's easy to see. Now, I know this is quite small. I will put it into a larger view if I can. I can't. So we'll look through it in a second as well. Now, we want to select it, strangely, but trust me with it, from users. And if I try and run that, it's going to tell me it can't. Because I need to join together some information. So I want to join together my tables. I want to join current address on current, let's get that right, address dot, where have I gone wrong there? Tell you what, let's just copy and paste. Current address dot user ID is equal to users dot user ID. And then I want to join from current addresses to my addresses table. Address on address dot address ID is equal to current address dot address ID. And now if I run that, it's able to find that information because it's using the links that we set up in our relational databases to put that in place. As that stands, that would find all of the addresses for all of the users within all of the tables and pull them all back. We don't want that, we just want the one. So I'm going to put in my where, which is like a standard where. I say user, or I'm going to have to say users, let's try that one again, dot user ID is equal to 1. Now I've got that in place. If I didn't put users.userID, if I just simply put in user ID appears in users and current users. And when I try and run it, it will tell you that it's ambiguous. It doesn't know which table to focus on. And as the actual table that contains our users' details is called users, that's the table we focus on. And that gives me those details. So let's jump back into Dreamweaver and go back up to that contact details section here. And we've got our contact details there, that's perfectly fine. We want our address to be something separate. And that's where we're going to use this join. And I will say joins are extremely difficult. So hopefully, if you can understand this and do this, it's going to look quite well. It's going to be an advanced piece of programming that you can do. Equals, and then place here. Now we have our select command here. It is a bit small. I said I'd re-go through it when we're in Dreamweaver because I can zoom in on Dreamweaver. And if I bring that back a little bit, we should be able to line it up quite nicely. So what I've said is select star, or select, not star. I don't want everything. I only wanted certain things. I want to select the address building number, the address street number, and the address town. I'm joining my current address by user ID to my users table, and my address on my address ID to my current address table, where the user ID equals 1. And once I've done that, what I can do is say $, why would it bring that up? And I want it to be my address is equal to, again, MySQL underscore query, because this is still performing a basic query, and it is going to be on my connection, and it is going to be the $SQL that I'm commanding. MySQL query, why has that not gone? SLQI. Always get that the wrong way around, never mind, sorry about that. So MySQL query there. We don't need everything in a loopable fashion like we've got here, because we know what we're going to use. So we can use the same style fetch array that we used earlier. So down here then, we're going to say $address equals MySQL underscore fetch, and I want to fetch the array. And the array I'm looking to fetch is going to be from my address section. And then I need to just echo, because we're still in PHP, and I want to echo $address at position building number. I want to tag onto a space. I want to tag onto that address at position street, so I've got the street in place, and I want to tag on next to that the final part, which is $address town. And that, oh, I forgot a comma there, a colon, sorry there. That should print it as I expect. So let's refresh and see if I've broken everything. Nope, we got that there. 1, 2, 3, any street from any city. The only thing that's missing in comparison to what Isabel has is our element here of the map marker. So back to font awesome. I'm going to say point. And we've got different pointers, not quite what I was looking for. Let's try map. We've got a map pin, street view. We've got a map marker. We've got a map element there. I'm going to go for, actually I quite like the street signs. I'm going to use this one. I'm going to copy that and echo it just before it. and save that. So now when I refresh it, you get those symbols there. So that is that left-hand column completed. Stylization's a little bit different. We'll look at fonts and bits and pieces a little bit later on. But we have our borders, we have in place these elements, and we are just now looking at this section here. Education and experience. So we're going to be doing a lot of the same things again. Tab that into its back in line nicely and scroll down. We're on to this section here then, and we're going to start off with our H2 for education. And we're going to have a H2 as well for experience or employment. And save those. I'm going to go into Font Awesome, and I'm going to find icons for both of those. So let's search for education. No, nothing. School. Got graduation cap. There we go. Copy that. And back on here then. Work. Got briefcase. Copy that. And paste it there. That's not lining up nicely with that, which actually, if I go back to Isabel's, doesn't anyway. They don't line up nicely, but I do want it to line up properly so it does look a bit more professional. So I'm going to have a look at my H2 here and go back to my previous H2 just to make sure I get it exactly the same, and they were margin top 4s. So now if I save and refresh that page, they should be roughly about the same line. It doesn't quite seem to be fitting, but I'll trust that it is. Could well be that my div row there, my column has a margin top there, which this one doesn't. There you go. Now they're lined up perfectly. Now, going on from there, before we can do that, we do need to fill in our database. So addresses come first. It's the address for her school. She said that she went to Aberystwyth University, so I'm going to put in Aberystwyth University address. Now, of course, for examples, it doesn't have to be correct, but being it is a real place, it does make sense to have it there. So I've got Pen Glass, and we're going to add that in as our street. It's in Aberystwyth as our town, and it has our postcode here. Field building number doesn't have a response, so as it's not there, I can just leave it blank like that. Now, the second one that Isabel said she used was Parkwood Vale High School, which I know doesn't exist because I created Parkwood Vale. So I'm just going to put in a space. I'm going to put in Parkwood Avenue in Parkwood. And I'm going to put in PW121WP. So we've got that there. Building number, I could put in, actually thinking about it, Aberystwyth University as the name of the building. Quite easily. And I could put in Parkwood High School as the name of the building. We got those different elements in place. So we're going to go into our qualification table. I'm going to add in a qualification for Isabel, and the education establishment doesn't exist yet. My bad, I've skipped a step. Let's go off of there. Let's cancel that one out and go education establishment. So the first education establishment is going to be Aberystwyth University, and that's in place. And the second one is going to be Parkwood High School. I'm going to say Parkwood High School. Now I can go back and do my qualifications, and I can add that in. So Isabel went to Aberystwyth University and studied BSc Web Development. Copy that into there. Grade, she said she had a 2-1. Date obtained, it looks like she was there until 2019, so I'm going to say the 2019-09-01 is American date ranged, so just be careful on that regard. That's just that one qualification. I'm going to jump in here then. I'm going to say Isabel, again, the education establishment this time is Parkwood High School. She had mathematics and her grade was a B. And, oh no, sorry, an A. And she finished there in 2014. So you generally get your results in August, so say 2014. The results tend to come out around the 27th, possibly 27th-ish of the 8th. If I click there, it doesn't like it. Because as you probably noticed quicker than I did, it's an American date format. You don't have a 27th month. Let's swap that around. 08, 20, 08, and let's say 27. There we go. Now you can list through all the different education elements she has in place. I'm going to do 2 or 3. I'm not going to do them all just to save a small amount of time. English Lang, and she had a B grade. I'm going to do the next one as well, and I know I forgot the date. I'm going to go back and correct that in a second. And this was English Lit, and she had a B grade as well. Okay, so the date would be the same date. Now, I've got those different bits in place for her education. The next one then is our addresses and our experiences. For our work experience, we need some addresses for different places. It was a local coffee shop. As she would have been in university, it'd be a coffee shop in Aberystwyth. I'm just going to simply add in, I'm going to say Aberystwyth University, and I'm going to have that as coffee shop. Penglas. Okay, I'm getting to it. Calm down. Aberystwyth, and actually, if that's the way I'm going to do that, we don't need to have additional elements there, because when it comes to the employment, I can say that our user, cancel that, continue application. Sometimes it does this, just click on the restart icon and it will open itself back up and allow you to connect. It's just, it got a little bit confused. I was trying to be too complicated with things. So let's snap that back by there. Right, employment. We want the companies first. Okay, data then. So I'm going to say that the company ID is blank and the address is Aberystwyth University and the name is the barista at a local coffee shop. That's the name of it, so actually it's the coffee shop because the job title is barista. I'm going to add in an address, again Aberystwyth University, and it's going to be library. And she will be the library assistant. Now, in employment, I'm going to add in the user, the company, the job title is barista, and the job role is there. I'm going to add in the user, the company, the job title is library assistant, and the role is there as well. Now we do have start and end dates. They are only years, but they are start and end dates. And what we can simply do is do 2017-01-01 until, I say, 2019. 2019-01-01. On this one, it is going to be 2015-01-01 and ending on 2017-01-01. So we have our employment in place then. We don't have any previous addresses, but we do have skills, we do have other user bits and pieces, and pretty much all of our tables now have some content in them. As well as making this a public element, when we look at the back-end side of things, we can have it list more information under password protected contents. And that means that if you are filling in your application forms, you may want more access to files than what we've got publicly available to people, making it a little bit quicker and easier for you to apply for things like mortgages, bank loans, credit cards, or anything like that, because you have all of your previous addresses listed in a nice, easy, copy and pasteable way. But we'll come on to that when we get to that section. Right now, we need to look at her education, and we need to look at which education establishment she went to. So we're going to put in place some PHP to get that education element out. PHP, and let's get that closed. Now, before we get into that, let's have a little think about what it is we're looking to get out. We want the education establishment name to start with, because we want Aberystwyth University. We want the qualification and the grade. So we want to select, and we're going to say education establishment dot, and we want the establishment name. Now, the way that we're going to do this part is we're going to get the establishments, both of them, and then we're going to add another query inside of that. And I'll explain that in a second. But right now, what we want is the establishment name and the establishment ID. So let's go education establishment dot, and I want the establishment ID. We're still using users as our table, and we still need to do our joins. So I want to join, first of all, qualification on qualification.userid is the same as or equal to users.userid. And then I want to join, this time, education establishment on education establishment dot, and it's going to be establishment ID is equal to qualification dot, and it's establishment ID. When I run this, it's not happy with that line. Join qualification on, I forgot the word from. There you go, and run that. And what it's given us back is all of the establishments that it has on record for our qualifications. But we don't want them all. We only want the unique ones. And that's where we can bring in a command called group by. And if I group it by establishment ID, it'll ensure that we only get our two. The two different universities that she is currently in. So I'm going to take that select command, copy it, replace that select command there, and just tab that in a little bit, and that in, so it's all nice and neat. Now, as with previous, I want to connect to my database and run that query. So I'm going to tab that in, and my SQL is there. This time around though, it is not skills, it's establishments. And I do want to do a for each loop, going through each of my establishments, printing them to the screen. So, same element, same bits and pieces here. Let's see, I have missed a small command to copy and paste, and drop that in. Let's update these establishments. Establishment, there we go, as I'm going to say place. Now, if I save that and run that, place dot, and I want establishment name. When I load my localhost again, I should end up with, no I haven't, well, don't need the LIs. We only need one there, don't need those LIs. And save that. I think the error was the 2 elements there, but let's see. Because it's telling me it can't convert from an array. And we do get the 2. We get Aberystwyth University and Parkwood High School, which is perfect. That is just what we want. But inside these, we want to then drill down a bit further. So we do want to echo its name. We then want to perform some more PHP in this section. And we're going to do a new SQL again, so $SQL. And this SQL is going to be a bit different. And what this one is going to say is, I'm going to say select, and this time around I want qualification dot, I want the subject, I want qualification, I've spelled that out terribly, dot, and from the dot I want to bring back the grade. Again, users is going to be our table that we're using, so I'm going to say from users I want to join qualification on qualification.userid is equal to users.userid. And when I run this, it will give me all of our qualifications. But I can put in a where command because in my qualifications, I have that foreign key. So qualification dot, I should just stick the paste in, it makes more sense. Establishment ID, and if I say equals 2, which should be the Parkwood Vale High address, that will bring back just their GCSEs. So we're going to do that inside this section here. Let's take that and I'll talk you through it when it's on the nice big screen here. So let's zoom in a bit more and let's minimize that one because I'm not interested in that for now. And I'm going to say equal to, I forgot the speech mark, so let's just wrap those in there. Okay. Now, what we have in place here is our select that says our qualification, subject and grade from our users table where the qualification and user ID, where the qualification establishment ID is equal to 2. But we don't want that. We want that to be dynamic. We want that to be based around the establishment ID we've given here. So if I copy this for a second and I paste it there and change it from establishment ID to establishment name to establishment ID, and then I'm going to echo, and I'm just going to echo out SQL. What we should get, I'm not sure if it's happy with that placement, but we'll see if this one works, is our printed screen. Yeah, it doesn't like that. So what we're going to do is single quote, dot, dot, and speech mark, no, that goes the other way around. So speech mark, dot, dot, and there, and then take this. So it's breaking out of those speech marks and is wrapping it in single quotes. It's now quite happy with that. And let's put in our end exclamation and reload our page. So we get this time round, although it's all a bit higgledy-piggledy and difficult to see, select qualification subject, qualification grade from users joining the correct tables all the way down to here, which if I copy this into Heidi SQL and paste it and run it, I only get that one grade. So it's able then to pull back the grades, everything she gets from that section. And it'll loop through and it will do the second one in exactly the same way with the right IDs, put the right things in place. So I can copy that and I can run it again, copy all of that, and I get the correct elements out. So with that in mind then, we've got our SQL. We're going to run a new query. This time, it's not going to be establishments, it's going to be qualifications or even subjects. So let's change this up and let's say subjects. And $subjects, and I want this to be also $subjects. So it's now going to query my database using the query we've created here. Underneath my echo of my name, which I'm just for a second going to wrap in a, let's say, a heading number 4 for our subject establishment name. So H4, there we go. And it's going to do that. Now it's going to go through subjects, it's going to do the same thing, and we want it to loop around and print our subjects to our screen. And this time, we're going to echo, and I'm going to echo $. We don't want these, I forgot to change these around, subject and subjects to subject. Let's singularize it. Subject, and I want to, first of all, put in place, and it is subject again. Now, if I echo that out, and then I echo grade, and save that, what we end up with is Aberystwyth University, the qualification, Parkwood High, the qualifications. They are coming through as H4s because I forgot the / there. When I put that back in place, we come up like this. So it's starting to get there. Now, I'm going to reopen up, let's go desktop, online CV, files, this version here. So this is the HTML, the original version. And you can see there's a little bit in place. It's almost looking how it would be. We don't have our date range, but we do have our name and our qualification. The qualification here goes on the line below. That one doesn't. What I am going to do is bring this back here and just simply put a space in between these so that they're all on one line. Now, if I refresh this page, it comes up and they're on one line. Obviously, where we have multiple qualifications, they should go down to their own lines. And the way I'm going to do that is by put a p tag around the start of the whole thing. And then there. And that will create for me my own paragraph in. So now they're coming through with their own elements in place. But as you can see, it still doesn't quite look like the original does, in the fact that we do not have this grey inner line element in place. And that is done just like we did our border around the whole of our div and this section here, or should I say, let's bring the right one up, on this section here for this whole outer div section. It's done in the same way. We need to have a look at our HTML and put it in place so that when we're working with these, when we're working with our establishment names, which is echoed here, and then going onto our qualifications, that is actually indented into its own div and row setup where it has its own borders. And what we're going to do is we're going to leave the establishment name where it is. We're going to break out of PHP and then come back into PHP by here so that it can continue with what it's supposed to do. We're going to put in place a div for a class row, and we're going to put in place, to start with, a div for a class, which is call MD again for medium, and this time 1. And that's just going to be empty. Now, I said earlier that these columns, these divides end up to 12. So this one is going to be a column of 11. It's also going to have a border, and the border it's going to have is a start border. Now, with that in place then, if I was to put this for each loop here, this section, I was to cut that, paste it inside here, and let's just look at where our tabbing is, because our tabbing has got a little bit haywire, but that's just where things land. If I save that now and I refresh this version, it is now all indented because it's not coming back out by here. So I need to have a quite quick look here, but we're starting to get in place. So there, this end tag here needs to be in a slightly different position. So we do need to end our PHP. So I was right to have a close PHP tag here. We then have our two divides to finish off our rows here. Then we come down by here and go back into PHP to finish off that for each there, and we can just do a single lined element. And now when I refresh it, they come back into the right place. If I go back onto Isabel's original, you can see the dates are there, but apart from the date differences, we have it all set in place. All I am going to do is give my experience, which I've now called employment, a bit more of a gap. So in here then, where I've got my H2 for employment, I'm going to do class equals margin top of 4. And refresh. So that drops it down a little bit. Now, when we are going through, in our database, in our qualifications table, we have the date obtained. So we could include our date obtained to bring in that date element so we can see when it was. But I'm not going to concern myself with that at the moment. I'm going to leave that out. I'm going to come back and I'm going to carry on working through my experience section or my employment section to get that in place as well. What we want from there then, we don't need the information based around the address of the business. That's more for the personal side of things, a more controlled side of things. What we do need is simply to bring back our employment details. So if I bring back employment, I want to select, let me start that again. Select, I want employment dot, I want company details, I do want job title, and I do want employment, don't put two employments, employment dot and job details. I also want companies dot company name from, again, using users as our connection. I'm going to say join and employment dot employment on employment dot, and I'm going to say user ID is equal to users dot user ID, and I say join, and I want companies on companies dot, and then I'm going to say company ID is equal to employment dot company ID. If I run that, I get the jobs, I get the job role, I get the company names. They're all there, they're all in place. So there's our select. That's what we're going to be doing. Let's check it into Dreamweaver so I can give you a bit more of a focused look of it. Underneath here, we're going to do our PHP, come out of PHP, and we're going to put in place our SQL command. So $SQL equals, and then inside there. So let's tab this over and go through it again very quickly. We want our employment, we want the job title and role details from the companies, we want the company name, we're using users as our base table. We're going to join our different tables based around the user ID or the company ID, and that's what we want to bring back. We are going to perform our same queries, so I'm going to copy these, underneath here, paste them there, tab it in, remove one tab there, And this one is going to be employment. And let's just copy, copy, and copy. I missed the dollar sign. Okay, so we've got that. We want a simple for each now, because this is a lot simpler than our qualifications, because generally speaking you have one job with your job title and description listed underneath it. So we just need a simple for each. And our for each is going to be for each employment. Let's go back on that section there. And I'm going to keep it simple and say $job. Now, within that section then, we need to put in an echo. And this is going to be looking at the job or the company title. So what have we done on Isabel's originally? We had the library assistant, we had the barista at a local coffee shop. So we need the job title first. So I'm going to say echo, and I'm going to do this as a H3. So a heading number 3, and I'm going to say that we are echoing out, and let's come back out of there and say $job as, and then I can say job title. Now, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to copy that, put it below, but this time I'm going to drop it down to a H5, so reduce the heading importancy and put it in as company name. And when I save this and I refresh this page now, what we should get is barista at a coffee shop, library assistant in the library, and then I need to do echo, and this one is going to be in a P tag, a paragraph tag. It is going to be $job, open and close brackets, and we're going to say that it is the role details. And end our P tag. Okay, save that, refresh this page, and you get your job details there. Now, just like with our qualification, we actually have them indented and using this line. Now in the original one, it had a bullet point next to it. I don't think the bullet point is needed, so I'm going to leave the bullet point off, but I will do the indentation. So we are indenting just this section here. We need to come here and break out to PHP. I am going to be lazy actually and copy this section here. Paste it, tab that in to the right places and bring that back out. This section here is going to be inside of a div, and the div is based around this one here, which it has nicely highlighted for me. And let's bring this in a second. And then I'm going to end this div by here. And it's indented that too far there. Now, I want to go into PHP by here and come back out to PHP. And then I need to do the single line PHP element here. And let's bring that back up to there. Save it. And what we end up with is our job role being indented correctly. Now, a lot of people don't really worry about the date range for their qualifications. Your education is your education. It doesn't matter when it was you achieved it, you've achieved that education. Jobs, though, are slightly different. So, in my employment table, I do have a start date and an end date. So I can add to here employment, and let's say employment dot, and I want start date, and I want employment dot end date, and that there. There isn't a smaller heading than a heading number 5. So I'm just going to put this in as a paragraphed section rather than a heading. And my paragraph section is going to have my start date first, and then it is going to say hyphen, and then I'm going to have my end date in place. And when I refresh this page now, I've got my start date until my end date. Now, in this section we only have the years, in this section we have the full thing, and like I said to you before, the year is the important part, so we need to remove the rest. And the way that we can do that is by specifying, using the date function, that we want to have our year, 4 Ys in capitals gives it our year, and then our date. Now if I do that, and I save it and I refresh it, let's see how it looks. Let's see if it's picked up correctly. It's telling me that it's not a well-formed numeric value. That's because it's looking to put in place a number in this section here. And what we're actually giving it in this point here, even though it comes from a date element, is a string. So we need to do a command called str, so string, to, and then we've got this one here, you can see the third one down, time. And that should then give us a number rather than our element. And it's now giving me 2017 4 times. So perhaps I only need the 1 Y, not the 4 Ys. So now if I do that, it gives me 2017 and 2015. So I need to do the same thing on this end date. I need the date command, the singular capital Y because I was wrong in that regard. I need to convert it using string to time and end with 2 close brackets. Now when I save that and refresh that, I get my date ranges looking more realistic. The only main difference is the fact of a little bit of difference in our styling and the brackets on the date ranges. But we can add those brackets in quite easily. Open a bracket there, and let's close a bracket there, and save that. Oh, that's too many brackets, too little brackets. Nope, that's perfect. So what we've got then, with a few little differences compared to what I originally did, we've got our picture, our name, and our email address. We've got our about us, contact details. We've got the skill set. In this section then we have our education. We have the employment as what they are, and all those in place. I think if I'm honest with you, I prefer it all on one line rather than two. It looks a little bit higgledy-piggledy. So what I would do there is just bring this along to, say, there, and keep that as a H3. Save that. And let's have a look at how that looks instead. Barista at a coffee shop, library assistant in the library. Let's go space, there, oh, don't duplicate things. And refresh. So there's that. Now this is the front end element. This is the displayed section. This is what we've created to give to other people. In the second part of this tutorial, what we'll look at is the back end side of this. A user-friendly way of quickly, on any device, updating your credentials. Because all well and good being able to control our database and go into our database and update information. Like for example, if I go into the qualifications and made a mistake, that was a B, not an A, I can update it there. And if we look here, so there's an A in mathematics, when I refresh it, it changes to a B. That's great, but we need to have a lot of things in place to get that to work. Well, we want to put a back end in place to make it so much more efficient. And we'll do that in part 2.